everyone, happy Monday. All right, Tara, we got to start out with some sad news. Well, I think it's sad news. I don't know if you were a fan of the show Friends, but there is breaking news that Matthew Perry, who played Chandler on Friends, was found dead in his home, and he was only 54, and it was an apparent drowning. So I heard this like not that long ago, and I just think it was so devastating because I was a huge Friends fan and I really liked Chandler. So yeah, these things, I feel like these things always happen in threes. So now I'm like on the lookout, like, oh my gosh, everyone watch their back, all the celebrities, because I feel like there's always three in the same week.
Yeah, I saw that he died, and I was never really a huge fan of Friends, but I did watch it from time to time. Was it a suspicious drowning or anything? Are there any details?
They're not really saying anything yet. So that makes me think maybe they're investigating. I don't know. They haven't given much detail other that it's an apparent drowning. And I guess he had like sent his assistant out on errands, and then when he came back, he found him dead. I'm assuming it was in the pool in the backyard. Because the I saw video footage on TMZ and they kept showing like the pool in the backyard. So I don't know. I haven't heard any details yet.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned things happening in threes, and
Mhm.
these aren't celebrities, but I already found out about two deaths this week of like family and friends. Like my uncle's wife passed away, and then a friend of mine, her mom died a few days ago. And so, like, not to get into like the woo-woo side of shit, but we did just have a full moon lunar eclipse on Friday. And I know you know this because you and I follow like eclipses and astrology and all that stuff. But there's like this whole theory that lunar eclipses can bring about fated endings, and that it can be like this time of transformation in a positive way where you're looking at death like in terms of getting rid of old habits and stuff like that. But historically, like a lot of cultures look at lunar eclipses as being like super powerful and being associated with bad omens and stuff. And so what I'm curious about is like this lunar eclipse is so close to Halloween. So I think there's like this definite like powerful energy in the air right now. And we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Oh, I could definitely feel the energy for sure. And a couple days ago, we were outside in the evening, like with our kids, and they were just acting like wild, like way more than usual. And the moon was like so huge. I'm just like, it definitely affects everybody, I think, one way or another. So I totally believe in that. So just another update, and I really didn't feel like getting super into this because I feel like there's always updates and they don't go anywhere. But there's more information now, as if we need more, regarding the Biden crime family. So, Senator Chuck Grassley wrote a letter to AG Merrick Garland saying that he received information from the FBI that over 40 confidential informants gave the FBI criminal information related to Joe, James, and Hunter Biden. And no surprise at all, the FBI covered it all up.
Yeah, I was reading about this in American Military News, and they were saying like these informants started coming forward years ago, like back when Biden was still Obama's VP, and they had like an FBI task force that shut down any potential investigation, saying it was all like foreign disinformation. And so, of course, there's like no response from the FBI or the DOJ to this letter from Grassley other than to say that they received it. So, like you just said, I'm sure this will go absolutely nowhere because just like all the other damning evidence about the Biden crime family, it's gone nowhere. So, I guess we'll
Yeah.
see.
I mean, I'm hopeful that now that there's a new speaker, maybe things will be different because I definitely think it would go nowhere with Kevin McCarthy. But it's funny because now that Mike Johnson is the speaker, I have been seeing so many clips that I remember seeing, but I just didn't like make the connection that it was him. And he's good. Like he is damn good. So I am so curious. Like I'm hopeful, but I also feel like nothing ever really changes. So we'll see. But
No, but you sent me something, and it's like we all know I have like my my crush on my boyfriend, Josh Hawley. And I watched the clip you sent me and I was like, okay, I think this is like my next Congress crush.
I know. Yeah, you sent that to me. I was like, me too. Like, I can't get enough of this guy. He is good and he's a constitutional lawyer, so I feel like he really knows his shit too. So it we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm optimistic though. Um, so, and I feel like another thing that I keep bringing up, but I feel like it's important to keep bringing it up because I think it's crazy that this is happening here in the United States. But on Wednesday, Jewish students at Cooper Union in New York City had to be barricaded in a library to protect them from these pro Hamas protesters, eventually evacuated through tunnels. One student that was there, Taylor Rosalind Lent, said, quote, personally, I don't feel threatened by pro-Palestinian rallies or anything in that sense. Everyone has their own right to be doing that. But I definitely did feel threatened when there were chants calling for the murder of Jews being chanted at me from my fellow students, end quote. And the president of the university made a statement and he said, quote, while there is room for productive debate and dissent, there's no tolerance for hate or threatening conduct, end quote. So my question is, if there's no tolerance, then what happened to the students who were shouting murder the Jews? Because I have yet to find an article stating any punishment for those particular students.
Yeah, because there hasn't been any. And then what I found also alarming was that apparently the NYPD chief of patrol, his name is John Chell, and he totally downplayed this whole incident, said it only lasted for like 10 minutes and the door to the library was never locked and there was campus security and plainclothes officers there the whole time. And there was like a back door to the library and they could have left through the back door if they wanted. And I read an article in WPIX News in New York that quoted this patrol chief as saying, quote, there was no direct threat. There was no damage. There was no danger to any of the students in that school, end quote. And then the New York Post reported that the university president, Laura Sparks, called it a peaceful protest and said, quote, to maintain a safe space, the library was closed for approximately 20 minutes while some student protesters moved through the building, end quote. So I guess we have different definitions of danger. And I'm pretty sure that the Jewish students who were inside the library felt that their lives were in danger when these, quote, peaceful protesters basically stormed past security and started pounding on the windows, yelling anti-Semitic threats. I'm sorry, but when I was a cop, this was called a hate crime, not a fucking peaceful protest. Like, get the fuck out of here with this shit.
Yeah, that's why I can't believe this is happening where it's like I feel like overnight all of a sudden everyone is like anti-Semitic, like it's just crazy. But I originally heard this and didn't really think too much of it. It wasn't until I actually saw the video of one of those Jewish students that was there and it was terrifying. Like I because you don't know that it's just a peaceful protest when there's a crowd of people banging on the door and yelling murder the Jews. Like I'd be terrified and I wouldn't want to go out the back door either, worrying like, are they anywhere
Yeah.
outside? I mean, it's terrifying. And I just can't believe again that this is happening and that so many news outlets too are downplaying it. And then you have at George Washington University, anti-Israel protesters used a projector to project phrases like, quote, glory to our martyrs and free Palestine from the river to the sea on the side of a building. And this is blatantly in support of Hamas, a terrorist group. We already talked on a previous episode about what that means when they say that phrase from the river to the sea. And they put this on a huge building at this very prestigious university.
Yeah, well, this is happening in multiple universities. They did like basically the same thing in New York University, where you had both students and faculty. First of all, they put on masks. And then they go into the library where students are studying for midterms and they tied these banners to the balcony in the library saying free Palestine. And then they started like doing all this chanting and yelling through a loudspeaker. And like, first of all, like if you believe that what you're doing is okay, then why the fuck are you wearing masks? And then
Right.
second, the number of faculty members that are participating in this stuff across campuses all over the country is really alarming, and more so that the schools are doing nothing about it. And meanwhile, you have all these Jewish students saying they feel unsafe, they don't want to go to school, they're removing any identifiable signs of being Jewish, they're afraid to speak Hebrew with their friends. And the repeated response in all of these schools is like, well, security officers are there, but they're standing by during these demonstrations and doing nothing because the school administration isn't giving them any authority to stop it. And I read this article in the Jerusalem Post, and it was a report by the Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism Ministry and Mosaic Organization. They released this report on Friday. And it revealed that during the past 2 weeks, since the start of this Israel-Hamas conflict, there have been 134 documented cases of anti-Semitism on university campuses in the United States, and that 45 of those cases occurred in a span of just 3 days last week. And according to a survey by Hillel, 74% of Jewish students revealed that the ongoing conflict in Israel is having a direct impact on their lives. 40% of students admitted to feeling uncomfortable even expressing their opinions in class and on campus since the start of the conflict. And like 1 in 4 students reported experiencing violence or hatred on campus within the past 10 days. And 58% of students expressed feeling unsupported by their respective universities, raising questions about the responsibility of academic institutions to provide a safe and inclusive environment for all students.
Yeah, it's crazy. I wouldn't want to send my kid to any of these universities.
No.
No. Governor Ron DeSantis here in Florida actually ordered the schools in Florida to shut down these protests that are with the group Students for Justice in Palestine because it is a pro-terrorist group. And he is receiving a lot of flack from conservatives, very right-wing people saying that, it's going against the First Amendment and this, we shouldn't mess with freedom of speech and all of that. But when you're making, like you said earlier, these hateful statements, I mean, it is a hate crime
Yeah.
specifically against Jewish people. And it's not even just the United States universities that are on this type of rampage. The Telegraph wrote an article saying that across the UK, Jewish students are hiding their kippahs under baseball caps for fear of their safety, which is absolutely ridiculous that they have to do that.
Yeah, I read one article somewhere in, I think it was the UK or Ireland, where a girl like had her Star of David necklace like ripped off of her by some guy at like a university sanctioned event at a local pub. And so like now these kids are like hiding their necklaces and stuff as well.
That's crazy. Like, I think it's showing how far left a lot of these Ivy League universities have gone.
Mhm.
And it's going to be interesting to see what this does for the Democratic Party because I read that 64% of Jewish people identify as Democrat, yet it's the left that are holding these anti-Israeli protests, and even members in Congress, like the whole squad being vocal about their support of Palestine and very outspoken. So it'll be interesting to see if this kind of splits the Democrat Party.
Yeah, well, it's like we talked about last week. You've got like parents of students in these universities, Jewish students, they're like pulling their funding and support for the schools. So, I mean, I hope this opens their eyes to do the same with the Democratic Party. But I'm also curious to see what's going to happen in Hollywood because Hollywood is like well known that it's like run by Jewish influence. So,
Well, that's what's so surprising is like, so is New York, but these protests are like insane in New York and a lot of the universities too, and a lot of Democrats in Congress. So it's just surprising me that there's not more of an outrage at what's happening.
yeah.
Because I mean, if these were MAGA protesters,
Oh my
you better
God.
believe like every news station would be condemning it. There would be arrests, there would be trials. Like, it's just crazy how they're letting this just kind of go. And yeah, people are talking about it, but I feel like they're not making that big of a deal considering we just had the Holocaust like not that long ago. I mean, this is recent history in the grand scheme of things, and this is how it all starts. It's the beginning of how something like that starts.
Yeah. So we're going to keep our eye on this and I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep talking about this shit as it develops because it's fucking wrong. But let's switch gears here for a minute and talk about the latest update with the border. One of my other favorite topics. So, Fox News reported on Saturday, I guess the Border Patrol released over 900,000 illegal migrants into the United States in fiscal year 2023. And this included more than 150,000 in September alone, which I think we talked about that. But overall, like including the ports of entry, there were 269,000 encounters in September, which was like this historic high that took fiscal year 2023 to a new record with like 2.4 million encounters. But what I want to focus on here is the 900,000 migrants. Because to clarify the significance of this, that's how many migrants were released into the interior of the country between ports of entry, not the migrants who were encountered at the ports of entry. And so this number doesn't include the thousands and thousands of migrants that were released into the United States with that fucking CBP app program. It doesn't include the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, or Venezuelan parolee programs. It doesn't include the untold fucking thousands of migrants who managed to evade Border Patrol altogether and make their way into the country. And like similar to, I guess there were 350,000 migrants encountered at ports of entry. So you have this 900,000 versus this 350,000. But what do they all have in common? They were all given those stupid notices to appear in court like fucking 12 years down the road, which again is a total fucking sham. And to further just kind of hammer home the reality of this situation, the article compared it like this. It said 900,000 Border Patrol releases is a population size larger than several US states, including Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, and North and South Dakota. So if that puts it in perspective.
Well, and I mean, I hate to say this, but it's like it's too late
Yeah.
to do anything at this point. Like Hamas did not just decide to attack Israel that day on a whim. Like they've been planning it for a long time. So when all of these countries that hate us saw this wide open border, you better believe that they started sending their people over. And,
Yeah.
you know, China has been in this game for decades. So, yeah, of course, like they probably took full advantage of what's been happening over the last 3 years. And it's really concerning. And it's like we can finish building the wall and do all this stuff now, and we should,
It's
but
too
it
late.
doesn't really fix the problem of like who's already here that wants to harm us and how organized are they. And I think again, like looking at these protests, it gives me a pretty damn good idea of how organized they are. So it's very concerning.
Yeah. And I think your governor just came out and said something about it. I think he was talking about how, like we've said before, expect the terrorist actual activity to start happening here in the United States. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
coming.
it's really concerning, but it's good to just be aware and be alert of all this stuff and don't freaking vote for Joe Biden again. I can tell you that much. I think even the people on the far left are starting to realize like, this is not what we bargained for. All right, so those are all the updates so far, and we'll come back on Wednesday.
No, we've got more. We've
Oh,
got
we
more.
do?
I
We
want to,
do?
yeah, I want to talk about two other articles because we haven't really talked extensively about like the LGBTQIA XYZ agenda in terms of like destroying women's sports lately.
Mhm.
But I did see a couple stories this week I want to bring up because I literally don't understand why we're still fucking tolerating and supporting this stuff. So this first story comes from Canada. So the Western Journal reported that there was a regional swimming competition in Canada that allowed a fucking 50-year-old man claiming to be a transgender woman race against 13 and 14-year-old little girls.
Are you kidding?
No, this happened last week during a fall classic swim meet at Toronto's Markham Pan Am Center, where 50-year-old transgender Melody Weishart competed against 9 girls who were all between the ages of 13 and 14. And then it was later revealed that this Melody is actually a male swimmer named Nicholas J. Cepeda, and he's a member of the Orangeville Otter Swim Club. And so at first, the governing bodies of the swim meet, like they claimed that he didn't compete against these 13 and 14-year-old girls, but a reporter had gotten a printed copy of the swim meet roster. And so they were forced to admit that he did. And then they gave the excuse that, like, swimmers are allowed to compete as their declared gender. But what's more disturbing is, like, even aside from the fact that you have a fucking old man who wants to compete against little girls in the first place, clearly a fucking pedophile wanting to
Yeah.
be around little girls in swimsuits, but this dude is a fucking professor at the psychology department at Toronto's York University. And what does he study? He studies the fields of aging, children, youth, and cognitive processes. Like, what the actual fuck is going on?
And I don't get it. Like, so did he declare not only that he's a female, but that he's a 13-year-old female? I mean, how the hell do you have a 50-year-old competing against children? And where are the parents? Like, if I was a parent at that swim meet, I would have screamed and like pulled my kid out of there and gone straight to the news channels. Like, I don't understand why they're just sitting by letting this happen.
No, and I saw a picture of the guy in the article, and he's clearly like a fucking old dude.
Like, this is clearly him fulfilling some fucked up like sexual fantasy or something.
Yes.
And they're
Yes.
letting it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, then I see this other, I saw two other stories in the Epic Times. One was a transgender fencer who just won the world fencing title as a biological male competing in the women's category at the 2023 FIE Veteran Fencing World Championships that took place in your state of Florida, where he beat out 14-time world champion from Finland, who is a biological female, Maria Lisa Samaroha. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. But this dude, he goes by the name of Liz Cohab. He's 6 feet tall. And like he's won his last 8 world titles competing in the women's category. And the USA Fencing Authority is arguing that transgender athletes who transition from male to female are only allowed to compete in women's events after they do like 12 months of testosterone suppression treatment and provide proof that they're compliant with this hormone therapy. But I'm sorry, hormone therapy or not, a fucking man is still a fucking man and clearly has like biological physical advantages over females, especially when it comes to sports. And there was a study in 2020 that was conducted by the British Journal of Sports Medicine that found that even after taking female hormones for 2 years, transgender biological males were an average of 12% faster than their female counterparts. And it's like, this shit's happening in multiple sports. And I swear, wasn't there some kind of legislation like preventing men from competing in women's sports, or was that only for schools? Because earlier this month, you had two transgenders won 2 of the top 3 spots in the women's division at the Chicago Cyclocross Cup race. And one was like a dude, Tessa Johnson, identifying as a woman, won gold, and Evelyn Williamson, another dude identifying as a female, won silver. Like, how do you call this a women's division competition at this point?
Well, that's what makes me so mad is like women fought so hard to just have women's sports. I mean, it was
Right.
a big ordeal. And what's crazy is it was a lot of the Democrats that put that in place. And now they're not saying anything. They're not standing up for women. And what this is doing is it's eradicating women's sports and
Yeah.
women's scholarships. And everyone's just standing by, like letting this happen. And it's absolutely just insane. And I don't understand why they can't have a trans category. If women had to put a
Right.
women's category, they should have a trans category.
Well, that's why we'll give props to the North American Grappling Association, because as of this past Friday, October 28th, they just updated their transgender policy, and their new policy has like a separate division for cisgender athletes, and transgender females are not allowed to compete in this division, and they either have to compete in the men's division or they don't compete at all. Like, on one hand, I think it's fucking retarded that there has to be a policy identifying cisgender females in the first place, but at least they're not putting up with this nonsense.
Well, and what I don't get is like, okay, if you are a man who is masculine and good at sports, everyone looks down at you like, oh, you're, a toxic masculinity. But then if you're one of these trans men you could go and take over women's sports and kick the shit out of them. And that's like everyone's cheering for it. It's like,
Yeah,
what is happening? This makes no sense. And it
yeah,
just makes me so mad because women's sports were not a thing for that long. I mean,
right.
this was something that they had to work hard for. So, yeah, like work hard for your own trans category. And why is it always men going into women's sports? When do you
Hmm.
see women going into men's sports? Like, I'm not hearing about
You
trans.
don't, because the men are gonna win.
Right. Yeah, they're not going to make the team. So it's like, it's just crazy to me. And I don't know how much longer they're going to let this go on, but what the hell? Like,
Yeah,
I can't get past the 50-year-old with I mean, the
I
cops should
know.
have been called at that point. Like, that's
That, that's why I had to
ridiculous.
bring that up.
Jeez. Well, and in Canada too, like they don't have access to the news anymore on social media. So I'm seeing all these posts from people in Canada. They don't even know what's going on right now with Israel and Gaza. They have no idea because they don't have access to anything. It's blocked. So it's just that country's leading us in just insanity. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, we're not far behind.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, that was quite the quite the end to our Monday, man. We'll have to keep everyone posted on all those crazy stories too. And we'll see everyone back here on Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in.